Hey, Closet Busters, come on and gather around. It's time once again to kick down those closet doors of life. We're here to escape our BS, explore our fears, and elevate our self-expression. I'm your host, Rick Clemens, bold move expert and coming out coach, and I'm going to take you to the party, the pulpit, the wake, and back to the party of living your life uncloseted. So come on, grab hold of yourself and get ready to step out, step up, and step into living your truth as we explore more stories, tips, and tricks for living your life uncloseted. Now let's get to the show. Hey, Life Uncloseted family. Those of you who may be in closets, coming out of closets, wanting to live life on your terms. One of the places we struggle the most to be ourselves, not just in life, but at work. We want to belong. We want people to like us. We want to be loved. And some people really want people to just stroke their egos, but that's a whole different show that we won't go into today. But what I found so interesting in my work, and having come from big corporate America, is there really is a struggle. And then you take and you compound that struggle when you're LGBTQ, and that adds other layers. Or if you're a woman in work, or if you're another cultural, you come from Muslim or Hispanic or whatever, there's just these things that happen. And then there's always the belonging of, well, can you just like me because I'm doing a good job? And that fitting in kind of takes me back to fitting in when I was in high school. And what I've realized over the years is so many of us struggle with this in our work environment, when all we really want is to be recognized for what we contribute, be valued, and all that good stuff. And a good friend of mine who has been on the podcast in the past has recently released a book that I love the title, Belonging at Work, because he really dives into this, not only from the diversity and inclusion perspective, but he takes it to that level of what should leaders be doing? What should we as people who are in the workspace and all this stuff? And I thought this was a really great topic to bring to all of you at the beginning of 2019, because maybe that is one of your, I hate saying goals because I don't really like those words, but intentions or inspirations for the year is, how can I be better connected and collaborate and everything at work? And that is why I'm bringing my friend Rhodes Perry to Life Uncloseted as the second show of the new year, man. So I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited about your book and glad that you're here, man. Yeah,
well, thank you so much for having me on the show again, Rick.
It's you're really a repeat offender, you know? So
yes, I love it. It's
really cool. You know, we saw each other not too long ago back in 2018. I happened to be in Portland in October, and we had some time to spend together, and the book was just about ready to be released and all that stuff. And it's such an amazing way of stepping into, let's look at workplace culture and all of this stuff, because there's so much that does go on, and it is such a huge part of our lives, being in the work environment. So I'd like to start by, you know, what was that thing, and I know you well enough, but I'd like the listeners to hear, what was the thing that really like said, hey, I got this book in me and I got to get it out of me? What was that thing that kind of drove you to this, Rhodes?
Well, it's, I say in the book, it's like 39 years in the making, right? So it's just the experiences, I think, first and foremost of being someone who's a member of the LGBT community, and definitely knowing those spaces where I didn't belong, you know, in different iterations of my life.
Right.
And, you know, I really wanted to blend those lived experiences with what I do every day in my work. And, you know, I do diversity, equity, and inclusion work with leaders. And so many leaders struggle with, like, how do I do this? Where are we going? How do we know when we have success? And so I was like, why don't I just put the basics in a book? And at least, like, that's a primer for people if they just want to get started. And if they like what I have to say, hopefully that will lead to, you know, working with even more great clients, you know, and that was that was, I guess, the luxury of having my own business. That was the point where I was like, I should do this now. I don't know when I'm going to have this opportunity again. And, you know, the moment struck, I was inspired. I was able to carve out some time, and here I am. You know, there's a book. There's a book on my desk right now. It's real, you know, and it's great.
It is interesting.
Nice to be on the side of it.
Yeah, exactly. I know just couple of weeks ago, I don't know, I was just like, okay, straightening up stuff in the house in my office. I guess I was getting ready because we were going on vacation, and my family had said they were going to come and stay here while we were gone. And I'm like, okay, well, let's kind of straighten things up. And then, of course, we're thinking ahead to the holidays and all that stuff that are now past. But I came across a box of my books. I'm like, well, this is stupid that these are sitting out in the garage. I don't want them to get humidity and everything. And so I unpacked them and put them up in my office. And I remember having this really interesting little emotional break, like, wow, I did this. Yeah. I wrote this. And it's so interesting when you can see something that you know impacted your own experience, that you can then put into words. And then when you start to see that it's impacting others, and especially when you're doing something like you're doing, where this diversity inclusion talks, and it isn't just about sex. It isn't about sexuality, so to speak. It isn't really about gender. It's all of the above, but it's really about humanity and really helping people start to embrace this. So when you say that people have a hard time knowing what to do, what's a common thing that they struggle with in the diversity inclusion stuff in the workspace? Is it just lack of knowledge? Is it they don't know where to start? Where's the real struggle that most people, come to you with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the leaders that I work with are deathly afraid of doing the wrong thing, and however they determine what that is. And so thereby they do nothing, right? And so, or, they've heard of other organizations, moving along the pathway of trying to create more equitable systems, whether that's hiring, more diverse talent, or trying to engage, products or services with underrepresented communities, right? Like they hear the progress that's happening and then something goes sideways. And the company is in the media and there's some bad attention to it. And, and that further, kind of roots them in their fear, where it's like, okay, we're definitely not going to do that. Or we're going to have to like evaluate all of the different pathways of doing this work well. And so it's like an analysis paralysis where it's this kind of, a holding pattern. And I kind of wanted to break through that just to kind of say, the book is intended for leaders and it's intended for change makers too. So if you're in an organization and you're in middle management or you're on the front lines, wherever you work, and you feel like, well, I'm not the CEO, so I can't do anything. It's like, no, you have to get out of that mindset. I mean, you can change the culture, at least, in your small space of wherever you occupy in the organization. You two are part of this change. And in fact, I think that's where the real interesting change often happens in very large organizations. And so just wanted to give some guidance, especially for folks who feel that they don't have the quote unquote power. They're not the capital L leader that, they have the ability to do some magical things in the organization.
Yeah. And I think this is where it becomes somewhat of a two-way street, at least from my perspective, is we kind of look to the leaders, the managers, all the people, in those quote roles. But even as LGBTQ individuals, I feel like we own a responsibility to go, okay, how can we enact change? How can we show up? How can we really, truly be who we're meant to be? And now this isn't to say that I think everybody needs to be out at work. Everybody has their own reasons for how they do this. I come from the space of the more normalized I can present who I am as part of the LGBTQ community in my work, then the easier it's going to be for people to connect or to ask the kind of questions and make it comfortable. I remember at one point I had just come out and I was in transition to my new position. And it was a big step for me because I had gone from being like high level exec to, okay, now I'm at a director level in a small company. Sure, I was third employee hired and all this stuff. And I thought, okay, we're just building this company. How can I have the most impact, not only with my talent, but who I am? And in the final interview, I said, one of the things I think I can contribute most to this company is open heart, open mind. And I happen to be gay. And I want to make sure that stepping into this role, I can help you create that environment. And I knew I was on eggshells because I lived in Orange County, California, very conservative. I really didn't know the two people I was talking to. And it ended up being one of the greatest things I did was putting myself out there to say, I'm going to show up authentically here. I hope you're willing to open up and embrace that. And again, not saying this is how everybody has to do it, but this is where I think there's some dual responsibility in these sort of things. How do
Absolutely.
you see that happening, man? I mean, do you see that often that people hold back? And I get it that some of us,
we can't be out at work because of where we live and the states we're in and all that sort of stuff. But do you see this a lot where people don't even feel like they can authentically show up?
Yeah. I mean, in the book, I write about a concept that Kenji Yoshino, NYU scholar, writes about, which is this concept of covering. And the idea is that, 3/4 of the workers in the United States, at least, cover some aspect that is important to who they are. So, you use the example of being a part of the LGBT community. So, that might be something more obvious of, I'm not going to talk about my partner who is of the same sex, or I'm not going to talk about my gender identity. But the really interesting thing that I think that comes from this research is that the most enfranchised people in the workplace, so, in the United States, white people, men, cisgender, straight, are also covering, and what is lost with that? Another kind of stat that pops out to me that's featured in the book is like 72% of workers in the United States feel like they don't have purpose. They don't have meaning. And so I think those two are pretty interconnected. If you feel like you can't be yourself at work, you can't show up authentically. You have to kind of park the important things at home and kind of slog through your day. Sure, you're going to go up for a paycheck, but you're not going to go above and beyond. You're not going to be innovative. You're not going to be committed to, that company doing the next great thing. It's just like, I'm here and people don't really get me. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to dream about all of the other things that I could be doing with my time. And so, I agree with you too, that like, if you have the ability, and you aren't, for whatever reasons, if you feel like you have to cover some aspect of who you are. So just using kind of the LGBT example, like for me, in workplaces, if I can show up and, contribute my genius to the job and, be acknowledged for those contributions. And I can share a little bit of my lived experiences of like, growing up as a trans guy who's bisexual, blah, 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 that is going to like, if I'm accepted and people are willing to hear my experiences, that will definitely change a lot of people's hearts and minds. And I think I agree, like if we all could do that, how different would, the conversations in this country be now, right?
Exactly.
But people don't feel safe. They don't feel safe. And if you don't have that safety at work, you definitely aren't going to have trust and you definitely aren't going to feel that you belong. And it's going to create a lot of static and a lot of friction and a lot of toxic workplaces.
I'm glad that you brought up the piece that people don't feel safe, because I know Simon Sinek, Start With Why, he talks about this a lot in his work about how unsafe people feel in the workplace. But you brought up that statistic of 72% or 70% people don't feel like they have purpose. Yeah. And as you were talking through that, and then you brought up the not feeling safe, it's so interesting to me that those two kind of intersect. It's like, okay, if 72% don't feel on purpose in their work, and if you actually took that percentage and said, okay, in an 8-hour workday, if 72% of their time was feeling like they're not on purpose, that means about 30-some% of the time they're actually doing something they feel like, okay, I'm engaged with. So now we're losing productivity. But then if they're losing productivity and they're not performing, then they're going to start feeling unsafe. And it all becomes one big cyclical thing. It's like, if I don't feel on purpose, now, granted, I feel like a lot of us, we kind of need to own the purpose thing too. But I don't know in the world of business, and especially even in the world of higher education, that there's enough emphasis put on what is your purpose? What is your reason for being? How do you want to have impact in the world other than show up, get a paycheck, produce the widgets, make the sales, grow the business, which are all good things. I mean, that's how the world goes around. But I find it interesting that this whole 72% of not feeling on purpose is like, that's huge. That means there's a lot of really miserable people out there doing the thing just to get a paycheck.
Yeah. And I think like the thing too is like getting curious around like the 30, about 30% of people who do feel like they have purpose and meaning. And, we need more research around understanding that. And, we do understand. And I know that you have 2 daughters who are kind of this generation of millennials and younger, where there is very little tolerance of, I'm applying for a job, and I have the skills for the job, but I'm not going to work at that job if I feel like I can't be myself, or I'm not going to be appreciated for showing up and, expressing, in a professional way, expressing, who I am in the world, and kind of being judged by my appearance rather than like what I can do for the company or what I believe or, take that to wherever you want to take it. But I think millennials are really shifting, kind of workplace norms and in this idea of purpose. And I also think we're seeing that with some of the startup culture with companies where, sure, they are a for-profit business, but they have a mission, they have a purpose, and I think it's a game changer. It's not just like you're making ice cream. You're making ice cream that's going to, feed the world and you give back in socially responsible ways. And we need more of that, because I think those are the businesses and the workers, the employers that do see how purpose, like when you are on purpose, how that is so good, not just for the workplace, but for the world, and for your own self-care, and your own self-worth. So there's a lot of power to it.
There is a lot of power to it. And the thing I find most interesting is, as I've started to play around in this, because I'm doing some work around men and masculinity and how they show up and some toxic masculinity stuff. And I'm stepping back into my roots. It's like, okay, I know I want to work with guys. It's always been guys coming out of the closet, but now it's like, okay, there's guys coming out of other closets they don't want to be in those corporate roles, or they want to be in better relationships, whatever it is. And instead of looking at it, and I had a couple of conversations with guys that own their own business just recently, and they said, well, I just feel like our mission's off. And I said, well, what if you started with what's your purpose before you do your mission? And then you look at your purpose and your intentions and then grow your mission out of that. And I saw, kind of hypothetically light bulbs go off over their head because they had never looked at it from that perspective. And I said to both of them, I said, if you started from the space of what is your own personal purpose, and then you took it but from that purpose, you knew then what your intentions were going to be. And I said, let's just take it for the next year. And I happen to be talking about 2019 with both these clients. I said, if you had your purpose and you knew how that purpose contribute to your intention, then how would that then guide your mission for 2019 for you individually? And then if you did that same exact exercise for your company with your team and had everybody do that individually and then bring that together, how much easier would it be to come to a mission that you truly felt was a true purpose-driven mission for your organization? And both of them were like, yes, that's what I want to do. That's how I want to show up. And it's powerful when people get that, because I think we went through, and we still do to some degree. When I was first starting to do, okay, I'm going to come up with a mission for my business. It was like mission was the big word, but we had to evolve. And now there's purpose. Now there's mindfulness. Now there's intention. There's all these things. And I just believe that if people would take the moment and go, okay, let's start from a different space, we can get to the mission, and the mission will be so much stronger in so many different ways.
Yes.
And then when your mission is strong, then you're going to attract the employees who they go, yes, that's what I align with. I have so many clients. Well, not so many, but I have like 3 clients right now who are in transitions in their careers. And they're like, I want to work with a company who I just go, I can sync with, and I can see their, where they want to go, what their purpose is. And whether it's, they have some social justice stuff, or they're doing what's right for their employees. And these are guys that are in their late 40s, early 50s who are like, I am done doing this crap I've been doing all these years. I want something more. And I'm assuming from the way you're approaching this in the book that a lot of those same core roots are in there. People are wanting something more than just let's show up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like an extension of that purpose is also getting very clear, especially for those business founders, the business owners, of what culture they want to work in, and really defining that as well, just as much as the purpose, right? Because this is where workplaces get into a lot of trouble, is that there is an implicit culture that's unstated, right? And so it's like some of the most basics, right? Is like, I talk about my experience working for a number of different employers in the book. And like one of the examples that I use is like, the workday starts at 9:00, but for this one employer that I was at, it's like, if you're not at your desk at 8:00, even though that's not stated, it's like you are judged. You are judged, and like that unfairly positions you when you're considering, when you're being considered to ascend in the company, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, that's like a really kind of
basic, but basic. But it says a lot. It's like I'm going to go to a really weird space with this. It's like a couple saying, okay, we're going to have an open relationship, but we're really not going to talk about how you do this. It's like, if you don't say what the real rules are and there's some implied thing that happens, then there's going to be contention from the get-go. So if 9:00 is start time, but then, oh my God, your butt better be in that seat at 8:00 and it better not walk out of that place until 6:00, even though it's 9 to 5 or whatever. There's something that needs to be discussed, because then you begin to have employees think, what else do I not know that I'm expected to do? And then the fear shows up, and then the trust erodes, and then there is no good relationship. So I'm curious, as you are starting to see the book go out and be in these spaces, what are some of the things people are having the biggest aha moments around? It doesn't necessarily have to be around the book, but as I feel like corporate culture, company culture right now is something that is hugely in flux, especially given the politics of at least the United States right now. What are some of the things that you're seeing most people going, this is where we really need, this is where we're struggling. This is where we need help. This is where we need insights.
Yeah, I think the biggest aha moments are just kind of like, when you think about a strategic plan or strategic goals for a business, what success looks like at the end.
Right.
And I think with diversity, equity, and inclusion work, so much of at least like the early phases, especially if the company's just getting started, is like, well, we'll just do a training, or we'll just change this one document, and then it's done. So it's very kind of like a very tactical, kind of the quick wins that can happen, and then it's done. But people do not get clear on we are doing this with the intention that in the end, our employees have a sense of belonging. That when our company culture is a healthy culture, this is what it looks like, this is what it tastes like, this is what it feels, like you can be there in it. It's just kind of the basic principles of goal setting or intention setting, because we were talking about not liking that word, but that you, in order for that to be present in your life, you have to imagine what it looks like now. And so in the book, I talk a lot about that more towards the end of how do we do this. And we have to be just as intentional and just as clear with what success looks like with this work. And if we can't define it, then we will continue spinning our wheels. And when I share this with people and with leaders especially, they're like, of course, right. We do this with everything else. Like, why are we not doing this with this work? That's beyond kind of, these very kind of tactical changes that happen over the next 3 to 5 years. It's like, long term, we are making investments, and this is where we're going, and this is why. And so that's really refreshing, because that was my intention with the book. But a lot of the first part of the book is really level setting. What the heck are we talking about in order to talk about, how to do it?
Right.
And so that makes me feel like I've given value, that people have something different. They have a roadmap, and that it's not trying to boil the ocean, but it's really trying to focus people when they make these kind of investments.
Right. It's interesting, I've had this conversation before, but, given the work you're doing and what the book is about, this quick win syndrome thing is so interesting to me, because I've been approached a few times to like, oh, so you're a diversity inclusion speaker. I'm like, well, kind of. But I'm not going to teach you the laws. I'm not going to tell you what you have to do. I'm going to come from that human space of, okay, what is it that your employee feels that they don't feel like they can actually be who they are? Whether it's, I don't feel comfortable putting family photos up. I don't feel like I can say anything well other than my partner. Which these are all decisions we all make. But I said, I'm going to come from the human side of, we're going to talk about why people don't show up the way they want to at work. Now, this isn't what I normally would do, but I do get asked every once in a while, oh, so you wrote this book, Yes, I will talk about that stuff. But the thing that comes up most is, well, we just need to get this done because then everything will be right. And it's like, no, it's not a one and done. This is like a one and get started and continue to work on this. And it doesn't, in my mind, it isn't just about diversity and inclusion. It is, what are you going to do in this culture in general for everybody? Because if one group doesn't feel included, there's a high probability that there's a lot of other people that don't feel included either, because that's the tone of the organization. And I think too many times people miss that piece. It is not quick fix, one and done. And it isn't necessarily just about one group, because as soon as you start to work about LGBTQ stuff, then you're probably going to have somebody who's like, well, I'm a Christian and da-da-da. Okay, now you got to kind of like go, okay, how are we going to help? So it's about finding, okay, where are all these things going to kind of intersect, where we create this organization that says we respect and care about everyone, and we want people to all show up authentically with respect and be in this together, even though we may have disparate, values and beliefs and positions in life. We stand for this. And I think too many times companies miss that piece of one time, one workshop, one training is not going to do it. It's an ongoing investment and intention. This is what's going to make us desirable to the employees who want to come work in our environment. And they often miss it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the hardest thing is that, there are folks that are in charge with setting the tone and kind of like addressing cultural issues in a workplace. And it's sometimes leaders, they don't know what they don't know. And it can be a challenge. As you said, there could be a group of people that come forward to leadership to say, hey, we don't feel like we belong. And you're right. If one person or one group of people feels empowered enough just to say that, chances are there are many, many other people that feel similarly. And it's difficult to manage up. It's difficult to get leaders to really listen and not immediately get defensive or respond, but just kind of take it in and then seek out people who've done this before, who know what they're doing and are not going to sell you snake oil to be like, sure, we'll do one training and everything's going to be better. It's like, gosh, it's like, come on, you wouldn't do that if you wanted to change your computer systems or something. Right. It's like,
you would go do an intentional, really do due diligence on, okay, what do we need the computer system to do? How do we need it to function? Whose hands are going to be on it? Which employees are going to be touching it? What kind of, it's so much different. And I love that analogy, Rhodes, because that's really what it's like. You wouldn't do this with a computer system. You wouldn't do this if you're going to move into a new office building. It's like, what are we doing? And I think another piece, and you said something that sparked this earlier in the conversation, but if you don't even ask the employees what the problems are, you just assume, okay, we've heard this in the news. We need to do this. Let's go do this now. And if you don't take the time to kind of walk around and go, so can we have a conversation about what you feel like is making you feel like you most don't fit here? And there's not going to be any backlash. We're trying to create a culture where we make everyone feel included. So you quit struggling, because one of the things I know for sure, and I had this happen a couple of times, and even as I came out of the closet, it was definitely a lot of my own doing, not feeling good at work, even though I was in a very inclusive company. What was missing is the questions, Rick, we know you're struggling. What do you need? What do you need right now? We can't necessarily give you everything, but we know there's a struggle. You're going through a divorce. You're coming out, and everybody knew what was going on, but there really wasn't anybody that was saying, do we need to give you a sabbatical? Do we need to reduce your hours and change your position? Do we need to give you a more flexible schedule now that you're a single dad and there's going to be days that you have to come in at different times? It was kind of like, work it out, but there wasn't any like, what's going to make this better? And I know people listening to this may go, well, if you did that with everybody in the company, it's more, let's get some ideas before we go running off half-cocked and go, okay, let's bring somebody in to fix this. You may be fixing the wrong problem.
Yes. And so much of that knowledge lives within the employees, I mean, and being open as leaders, being open to that feedback and creating mechanisms where you can get the feedback, whether you're prepared for it or not, is really, really important. And that's, and the work that I do really, for some organizations, trying to get those employee focus groups up can be a real struggle, because sometimes leaders think that they know what the challenges are, what the problems are. And I think that those assumptions, or I would say arrogance at times, it can get you in a lot of trouble. Yep. And I talk in the book about, inclusive leadership traits. And there's 6 different traits, and I didn't come up with that model. But one of the traits is to be curious and to be a leader, in ways of being curious, you have to listen. You have to ask questions. And if you don't know what those questions are on this topic, there's tons of people that can give you insights on that, but to be open to what those responses are, because you'll be surprised 9 times out of 10, and you'll learn a lot, and that will inform the approach. But if you're not open to listening, and if it's like the old model of leadership of, it's almost like, I was raised Catholic, the infallible Pope, you're the infallible leader, you know everything. It's like, oh, that's where you get in a lot of trouble. And that's where, toxic workplaces can get, even worse.
Yeah. And I believe that toxicity it's such an interesting one, because we assume we know what the toxicity is until we dive in and get curious. And then suddenly it's like, oh, we didn't even see this. This was not something we even anticipated. And a quick story around that before we wrap this up, because I want to give you some time to talk about the book and where you want to go with it and anything you have to offer here. But I remember when I helped implement a customer relationship management system at the last job that I worked at, and all of us were pretty on board except one employee. And he had never used anything like this. He was old school sales guy, and he struggled even to use the computer. And the rest of us were kind of like next generation. We'd been in tech. We knew all this stuff, but nobody ever really asked him what the problem was until we were sitting in a meeting, and I was the guy going to run the implementation. And he and I didn't really click. And I thought, okay, I'm going to let's set this aside and let me hear what he's saying. And I asked him point blank, I said, you seem to be really struggling with the implementation of this new system. What is it that bothers you most about this? And he said, I didn't come here to try to fill in data on a computer. I came here to sell and give people a solution. Mm-hmm. I remember the president of our company just almost his mouth dropped open, literally I didn't even think about that. And I said in that moment, I said, well, if we could help you sell by using this system and give you the ability to sell better, would you be more in tune with using it? And he said, absolutely, but I'm here to sell. I'm not here to play on a computer all day long. From that moment forward, I knew as the guy implementing that we had to find a way to make this not super cumbersome and to provide ways where that guy was going to excel by using it. The rest of us knew how we were going to excel by using it, but we had to find it. But had I not asked that question, we never would have got there. And he still kind of fought it. But once we kind of taught him some things and said, okay, here's some shortcuts. This is really all we need to know. And I had to go back to my vice president and say, you know what? You can't ask for all this crap you're asking for them just to put a fucking lead in. It's ridiculous. Get the basic stuff in, Yep. Because as soon as the process becomes too burdensome, the next thing that's going to happen is you're going to start beating the salespeople up over the head because you're not making your goals. You're not bringing in the revenue. Well, they can't do that when all they're doing is spending their time making sure all this detail is in about a lead. We got to simplify this. And I think that's a pretty good example of finding a way to go, what's going on? What do you need most? And how do we get your needs met by asking the right questions in an organization and helping you feel like you belong as part of the solution, not part of the problem. So I'm really excited for you, man, on this book here. And I know you are going to use it in all the great ways to really get out there and have impact. But I'm just curious, Rhodes, what is the one thing you would love most to really see the book do, either for yourself or in general? What is the thing you'd love to see that book really do for the world? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, it's a huge question. I think it's a movement. I hope that people find value in the message. I hope that there's that they can reflect on their own experiences in the workplace and use it as a launching pad to make changes big and small in their own workplaces. I mean, that's my hope. it was part cathartic for me to kind of put my own story in the preface. There's a little bit of personal stories throughout the book, but most of it is kind of, it's a roadmap for other people to do their own work. Right. And I hope that they do. I hope that they really go through the content, but also some of the exercises in it and find value to help themselves and in their workplaces.
Awesome. So is there anything you'd love to leave listeners with? Is there somewhere they can go to see the book? I know you can get it on Amazon, but is there any special stuff you'd like to throw at them? Any other ideas you'd like to share with them before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, definitely. If you go to my website, rhodesperry.com/book, you can find both where you can get it on Amazon, but there's also an opportunity to get a signed copy there. And when you do, if you let me know, and you're interested in getting some coaching around how to actually do this, I'm offering a 30-day belonging challenge in February. And for anyone who gets the signed copy of the book, you get into the program at 50% off. So that is definitely a gift I will extend to your audience, and that is happening in February of 2019. So hope you all can join, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
And I've seen Rhodes do some of these things before, and I can tell you that he operates from the heart, he operates out of service, and he really truly does operate from a place of impact in the world. So really can't tell you how much I'm so happy that this is happening for you and that the world will be impacted, whoever does choose to be impacted by belonging at work. So thanks again, my friend, for being part of my life and part of our audience's life. It's always great to have a conversation with you. And I think we're going to wrap it up right there. That was a good place to say we're done. We have taught some people what it takes to belong at work. So thanks for being here, man.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, there you have it. Another episode of Life Uncloseted has come to an end, but that's okay. We're going to be back in just a couple of days sharing more stories, tips, tricks, and wisdom for helping you live your life uncloseted. And you know what? You can share too. Just take a few moments if you like and if you believe in this podcast and share it with someone you know today. Share it from your phone, go share it on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you are. Maybe even give us a rating and review, because you know what? It's all about the planet living their life uncloseted. I'm Rick Clemens, host of the show and the guy who helps you make those big, bold moves. And I hope you never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping in to living your life uncloseted. Catch you real soon. Take care, everyone.